Buenas noches, estudiantes. Well, we're going to be looking at preterite versus imperfect, the two past tenses again. I'm also trying out some background ambiance. So I don't know if you can hear that or not. I'm not sure how loud to make it. But it's supposed to be soothing. So I'm hoping this is going to soothe you while you're doing your Spanish. So, okay, let's look at this together again. So the question is, when do I use the imperfect past tense? Okay, so we've been looking at reasons, and let's go over them again. So basically, whenever you're in Spanish or you're going to speak Spanish, you're talking about the past tense. Anytime you have a verb that you're going to put in the past tense, you have to decide, do I put it in the preterite or do I put it in the imperfect? Because every verb exists in both. Okay, like for example, I talked in the imperfect would be yo hablaba, but I talked in the preterite would be yo hablé. So there's always going to be options, okay? And you just have to get comfortable and memorize when to use imperfect and the preterite, and that way when you do have to choose, you'll choose correctly, okay? So let's go over it again. Alright, so you're going to be using the imperfect, and when I'm talking about the imperfect, that is the past tense that ends for AR, verbs in aba, abas, aba, abamos, and aban. And if it's an ER-IR verb, it's going to be ia, ias, ia, iamos, ian. And that's with the I's with the accent mark on it, okay? And you have all that in your notes, and you can also refer back to the last video. So when do we use imperfect? When do we choose to make the verb that we're going to use in the past tense? When do we choose to put it in the imperfect tense, okay? Well, if the verb that you're about to use is showing a repetitive or a habitual action in the past, you're going to put it in the imperfect. If you're ever telling time in the past, it's always going to be in the imperfect, okay? If you ever see a keyword like muchas veces or generalmente or todos los días, any of those words that give the idea that something happened a lot in the past, then you're automatically going, yes, my phone is freaking out. You're going to automatically use the imperfect. Okay, if someone is trying to convey that they used to do something or would do something in the past, or they used to do something like would go skiing, or they were talking, so anything ends in the ing is usually going to be the imperfect, okay? Okay, and if you're ever expressing your emotions or someone is expressing their emotions in the past, that's always going to be the imperfect. And if you ever see simultaneous actions in the past, and when I just say that, remember we're talking about while this action was happening, this action was happening, okay? That's always going to be the imperfect. And again, the last one here is if the action has no clear beginning or end, okay? If it's just kind of like the water was blue, the ducks were singing, you didn't really see the beginning of that action, you never saw the end of that action. It was just kind of setting the stage, or it's kind of like narrating before a story begins. So all of these are situations that are going to require you to put a verb into the imperfect tense and not use the preterite. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so next question is, so when do you choose the preterite form for your verb that you're going to be using? Well, if the verb you're about to use is interrupting an existing action, like the sky was blue when the sun rose, okay? So the sky was blue would be imperfect because you didn't really see the beginning or the end. But then the sun rose, that's a definite action. It had a beginning, it had an end, it was done. Okay, so you're interrupting action. I know y'all didn't like that example, but, you know, the plane exploding, that was a one-time action in the past. So that would be an interrupting action. Or the house was quiet when the phone rang. The phone rang, that was the interrupting action. That verb would be in the preterite tense. Okay, so if your action is a one-time event, like you said, yesterday the dog bit me, okay? It happened, it was over, it was not a habitual thing, hopefully. That would require the preterite tense. Now, if your action has a clear beginning and or a clear ending, then you would use the preterit. Like if I said, I ended my math class yesterday. Well, that is definitely showing that there was an end to your action, so that would be the preterite tense. Now remember, when I'm talking about the preterite tense, I'm talking about, for AR verbs, the endings are a, aste, o, amos, aron, okay? For ER, it is iste, io, imos, ieron, and for IR also. So, anyway, you have your endings. Those are the preterite endings, but you can go back and look at them in your notes. Okay, so if you ever see one verb kind of standing by itself, and even if it's in a sentence, it's kind of like in a phrase by itself. So let's say you see something like, yesterday was cold. Okay, you see was. If was is by itself, it's almost always going to either be ser or a star. Okay, ser or a star. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that because I saw in your homework that a lot of you were confused about that. So, the sky was dark. I'm trying to think of another one. We were happy. Okay, when the only verb is one of those helping verbs like were or was, it's going to be ser or a star. Okay, but in your sentence, if you see things like were talking, would sing, used to eat, make sure that you don't worry about, okay, I'm going to use orange so don't freak out. Don't worry about translating this part, okay? Just focus on the main verb, okay? If you have like a helping verb and the main verb, like here's a helping, just concentrate on the main verb and just put the right ending on it. That's all this other stuff, these little helping parts, these are all included. See down here I said the rest is included. So just conjugate the main verb, put your past tense ending on it, and don't worry about trying to conjugate or translate the were or the would or the used to part. Okay? Alright, I hope that helps. Okay, so which form am I going to use? So I'm going to give you an example of how you kind of work through it in your mind. Let's say you wanted to say it was 2 o'clock. Okay? So already you know that with time we always use ser. Okay, we always use ser with time. Okay, so you already had that here. You know ser is going to be your verb. Now you're asking yourself, okay, now am I supposed to put ser in the imperfect tense, or am I supposed to put ser in the preterite? So you know that ser is irregular in the imperfect and it's era. Okay, it's also irregular in the preterite and it's fue. Okay, so those are going to be your two choices because you know one of those is right. Well, if you remember, you always, from our little rules back over there, you always have to use the imperfect with time or date in the past. Okay. So since you memorized that, you know that you have to use the imperfect form, which is going to be era, okay, which is right here. Right here, okay? Now, when you say a time, remember any time that's greater than 1 o'clock, it has to be in the third person plural. I know I'm trying to make this a little bit harder. So that's why it's not just era, it's eran, okay? So, it was 2 o'clock is eran las dos. You chose the imperfect because you have to with telling time in the past. You used ser because you always have to use ser with telling time. That goes back to Dr. Cliff. And it's in the plural form, the third person plural, because you just have to do that. That's just one of the rules for telling time. It's always in the third person plural unless it's 1 o'clock. Okay? Alright, so what I want you to do is go to the lesson assignment and see what I have for you there, and we'll just keep reviewing this until we get it. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time. Hasta luego.